Die Another Day, otherwise known as Dad, is just like a real dad in a lot of ways. It's full of corny jokes, it's kind of offensive at times, and in the end, Pierce Brosnan went out for cigarettes and never came back to the franchise. It's remembered as the movie that killed the James Bond franchise and forced them to reboot into the gritty, more grounded Daniel Craig era. But is it actually all Dad's fault? Well, the real story is a bit more complicated. By the 1990s, audiences had become a little sick of James Bond. Timothy Dalton's last Bond film, License to Kill, was the lowest performing Bond movie at the box office ever, and an ensuing legal battle over the franchise led to a 6-year gap between films. During this time, Timothy Dalton's contract expired, so producers Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli decided to launch Bond into a new era with Pierce Brosnan at the helm. Brosnan's Bond films were a bit more modern than their womanizing and at times quite corny predecessors.
Because I think you're a sexist, misogynist dinosaur, a relic of the Cold War.
They were more serious, a bit more gritty, and Brosnan played the role with more intensity. His first Bond film, GoldenEye, was a huge hit and quickly became the highest grossing Bond film of the franchise. Brosnan returned for 2 sequels that were kind of forgettable and pretty by the numbers, before producers Wilson and Broccoli, that's Barbara Broccoli by the way, not an actual piece of broccoli, started preparing for what would be the 20th film in the franchise. It would also coincide with the franchise's 40th anniversary, so they wanted to go bigger and better than they ever had before. So they called up the screenwriters from the previous film, Neil Purvis and Robert Wade, who concocted a film that contains surfing spies, giant lasers, and a Korean guy turning British. And so Die Another Day was born. So let's talk about the film itself. I'm gonna try and recount this movie as clear as I can, but please pay attention because this film has a new twist every 5 minutes. And the 2000 Sydney Olympics are way more important to the plot than you would ever guess. So this film is iconic from the very beginning, with Bond infiltrating North Korea in the best way he has ever infiltrated anywhere. Surfing. Because I guess no matter your opinion on North Korea, we can all agree that it's a great place to catch a wave. So Bond is in North Korea to investigate Colonel Moon, who has been trading weapons for conflict diamonds. It turns out Bond's cover is blown and things quickly descend into a hovercraft chase across the DMZ, which ends with Bond driving the hovercraft off a cliff, killing Colonel Moon. Bond, of course, is able to save himself by grabbing onto the rope of a bell and delivering this iconic zinger.
Saved by the bell.
The North Koreans imprison Bond, and we get to hear Madonna's amazing Bond theme while he gets tortured by scorpions and CGI naked women dance. Now, a quick side note, Madonna's theme song is something that people seem to really hate about this film. And look, I'll admit, there are so many elements of this movie that are just outright bad. But Madonna's theme is absolutely not one of them. It's probably the most modern Bond theme that the franchise has ever had, and I think it's really catchy and frankly, cunt. I also love how Madonna made this song in the time where she was kind of pretending to have a British accent.
I have a problem with the fact that there's no air in here and I'm gonna die. Open the door now. Just give me a fan.
And I love how in the behind the scenes clip for the video, she just talks shit the entire time.
We came back in for reshoots. Haven't you heard MGM wasn't happy with the size of my breasts? I want Pierce to want me. Do you know what I'm saying?
Also, speaking of behind the scenes clips, I also found this one of Pierce Brosnan with some beautiful misplaced optimism for the film.
Lee Tamahori, who's directing this one, he kind of shoots from the hip. I mean, it looks like he doesn't know what he's doing, but I think he does. I think it's going to be a good movie.
Oh, Pierce. So anyway, eventually Bond gets out of prison when he's traded for Colonel Moon's right-hand man, Zhao, whose face looks like this after having a briefcase full of diamonds blow up in his face. And let me just say again, wow. He looks so incredibly stunning with this look. He looks fabulous. He should not be an international criminal with this look. He should be at the club. Anyway, Bond is now back in MI6 custody after 1.5 years in prison. According to this timeline, I'm pretty sure 9/11 would have happened while Bond was in prison. And it made me think, like, did someone have to give him a debrief of all the other stuff that happened in that time? Like, did M sit him down and tell him that Britney and Justin Timberlake broke up? Anyway, M doesn't want to let Bond out of custody because she thinks that he might have been the one selling secrets to the North Koreans. Bond manages to escape by relaxing so hard that his heart stops. It's revealed that he's being held in Hong Kong, so he swims to shore, of course, and he meets up with his friend at a hotel who turns out to be a Chinese spy. He tells Bond to go to Cuba to find Zhao, who is hiding out in a strange clinic where the rich and powerful go to undergo DNA replacement therapy. In Cuba, he meets the beautiful Jinx, played by Halle Berry, and they immediately have sex. Bond goes to the clinic that Zhao is hiding out in, and he finds that he's doing the DNA replacement therapy so he can go from a handsome, diamond-encrusted Korean man to a kind of mid-German guy. That is so sad. If you can't love yourself when you look like that, what hope do you have? Oh my god. In the meantime, Jinx is doing a fake consultation with the doctor who runs the clinic, and she delivers this iconic line before killing him.
It is a painful process, I'm afraid, but all great art is.
Most artists are only truly appreciated after they're dead.
And she then blows up his office with her Sony Ericsson set to bomb mode, which is so cool, like mine just had Snake. Zhao ends up getting away, but not before Bond snatches some diamonds off of him, which turn out to be conflict diamonds being made and sold by the British millionaire Gustav Graves as normal diamonds. So Bond returns to London to find Gustav Graves, who is introduced in the skydiving moment, which was obviously so impactful on Queen Elizabeth that she recreated it at the 2012 London Olympics. That crazy lady. Gustav lands in the middle of a press conference and we get a bit of an exposition dump. He's being knighted, he has a new space program called Icarus, and he's maybe going to try out for the British Olympic fencing team. Okay. Oh, and we also meet Rosamund Pike as his publicist, Miranda Frost. Bond then goes to meet Graves at the fencing club where he meets a woman named Verity, played by Madonna, in an absolutely fantastic cameo, making her the first ever person to both do the Bond theme and appear in the film. She's a history maker. So Verity / Madonna tells Bond that Miranda is actually her fencing protege, and that Miranda actually won gold at the 2000 Sydney Olympics, but only because her opponent OD'd on steroids. That's going to be important to remember for later. Bond and Gustav end up having a sword fight that tears the club apart, which leads Graves to invite Bond to the test of his new giant space laser. Beforehand though, Bond goes to visit Q, where he picks up his invisible car and a magic glass-breaking ring. And he also does this really intense virtual training program that features his co-worker Moneypenny being shot in the head. To be fair though, we've all had days at work where we felt like this. So after all this, we get another twist. Miranda Frost is actually working for MI6. So Bond goes to Gustav's ice palace, which turns out to be kind of shaped like the Sydney Opera House, where Miranda won her gold medal for fencing in 2000. We also meet Gustav's henchman in a moment that actually made me laugh out loud.
I'm Mr. Kill.
Well, there's a name to die for.
Bond still got it, still funny. So then we get another twist. So it turns out that Gustav Graves has also undergone the DNA replacement therapy, and he is actually Colonel Moon from the beginning of the film. So Graves does his demonstration of his giant laser, and Bond uses his invisible car to see where they put the magic briefcase that controls the laser. He's caught out by Miranda Frost, and they immediately sleep together. Meanwhile, Jinx is also tracking the magic case, but she's caught by Mr. Kill, and they don't have sex. He tries to interrogate her, but she uses her advanced interrogation-resistant techniques to avoid it.
Who sent you?
Your mama.
So he decides to chop her head off really slowly with the laser. Bond comes to rescue her, and him and Mr. Kill have this crazy laser fight where Mr. Kill ends up being lasered through the head. There is a lot of lasers in this movie. So Bond confronts Graves about the whole thing, and then there's another twist. It turns out Miranda was the spy that's been working with the North Koreans. And how, might you ask, did they make her sell out her country and commit treason? Well, obviously, it comes back to the 2000 Sydney Olympics, where Colonel Moon made her opponent OD on steroids so she could win the gold by default. So I guess it turns out that Nikki Webster was only the second most impactful thing to happen at the 2000 Sydney Olympics. Bond then uses his magic ring to escape, and he gets in Graves' rocket car, so then Graves tries to melt him with his giant laser. But he forgot one thing. James is a surfing expert in this film. So he surfs down the Arctic tsunami caused by a collapsing glacier. Yes! Bond then gets in a car chase with Zhao while he's trying to save Jinx from the melting ice palace. And he ends up killing Zhao when he drops this beautiful chandelier onto him. Because that's the only way for a man so fabulous to go out. Everyone then leaves to go to Korea, where Moon/Graves is going to use his giant laser to blow up all the mines in the DMZ and take over South Korea. So Bond and Jinx sneak onto the plane, and Jinx ends up having this amazing sword fight with Miranda, where she finally gets to test her gold medal by default winning skills. But Jinx ends up killing her when she stabs a copy of The Art of War through her chest and delivers this iconic line.
Read this, bitch.
And then Bond kills Graves by depressurizing the plane and pulling his parachute and delivering this iconic line.
Time to face gravity!
I have to wonder, like, did him and Jinx rehearse those lines before getting on the plane? Like, they're a little too smooth. So Jinx and Bond escape the plane by getting in a helicopter full of diamonds and flying that away. We then immediately cut to a scene of James and Moneypenny getting it on, but it turns out it's just the training simulation. Which is sad, but I will say Moneypenny is doing a little better than she was in the last training simulation. Then we get a real scene of Bond and Jinx having sex, and that was the last time we ever saw Pierce Brosnan as James Bond. So what the hell happened? Did this film actually kill the franchise? Well, even though some people might remember this film as a bomb, it actually did really well at the box office when it came out and was the highest performing Bond movie up until that point. The reviews weren't exactly raves, but it wasn't torn apart either. By all measures, the film was received about as well as it could have been. But even though this film did well at the box office, Wilson and Broccoli obviously believed that the franchise needed to change. And that's because blockbusters in general were changing. Die Another Day belongs to this strand of kind of goofy blockbusters that didn't really last long after 9/11. Films like Charlie's Angels and Lara Croft Tomb Raider really leaned into silliness and presented something that was quite far away from the real world. But just a few months before Die Another Day was released, The Bourne Identity came out, which was a huge hit with both critics and the box office. And Bourne offered a sharp contrast to Bond. They were both spies, but the Bourne films were grittier and more violent. There were no gadgets or bad puns. There was just Matt Damon in some truly fabulous wool sweaters. And thematically, films like The Bourne Identity reflected more how audiences were feeling post 9/11. They were a bit more paranoid. They'd been exposed to confronting real-world violence, and they trusted their government less. And despite Die Another Day being a financial success, there were signs at the box office that audiences might not have been feeling it anymore. Charlie's Angels Full Throttle, aka the best film ever made less money than the original, and the Lara Croft Tomb Raider sequel did not do very well at the box office. And of course, there was also the Austin Powers effect.
Yeah, baby!
These films were hugely successful and did a great job at poking fun at some of the more ridiculous elements of Bond, to the point where audiences were too aware of the tropes that the Bond franchise relied on. When you have the villains in both films concerned with trying to get a giant laser, you know you've got a problem.
Begin laser ignition sequence.
Begin laser ignition!
Although I will say, I think the Bond movies got the hint to change up the ridiculous names of the women.
My name is Pussy Galore.
But I think they might have gone too far in the other direction, because there's a woman in Die Another Day whose name is
I am Peaceful Fountains of Desire.
Like, that's a little too classy. And there was also the CGI effect. After a glut of films that showed off their computer-generated effects, like Independence Day, audiences started to get a bit tired of it. Die Another Day tried to jump onto this trend, and in the behind-the-scenes clips, they pretty proudly showed off the elements of the film that were computer-generated, but audiences were after something a bit more gritty and real by this point. And if you look at the years after Die Another Day, you can obviously see that Wilson and Broccoli made the right decision to reboot the franchise. The two Bourne Bourne sequels were huge hits, and both Batman and Mission Impossible gave themselves gritty, grounded reboots. But it seems like the decision to reboot things was not always the plan for Bond. In fact, after Die Another Day, everyone, including the producers and Brosnan, seemed to think that Brosnan would continue on as James Bond. And the screenwriters even completed a script for a spin-off movie starring Jinx. They planned to shoot a sequel with Brosnan, but at some point, things fell apart. Broccoli and Wilson obviously wanted to take things in a different creative direction with the franchise, but there was also the issue of money. Brosnan reportedly wanted $20 million for the sequel, which is pretty much in line with what other Bond actors would get for their fifth film. But at $142 million, Die Another Day was already the most expensive Bond film ever made. Casino Royale, even though it was made a few years later, had a similar budget, but Daniel Craig only got about $3.2 million. But you know what? After seeing him in those swim shorts, I think he should have been paid $20 million as well. So because of all of this, Brosnan was pretty much let go as James Bond. But don't worry about Pierce, just a few years later, he got to show everyone that he's not just good at playing Bond, he can sing and dance as well. So in the end, I think Die Another Day's reputation as this huge bomb that killed an entire franchise is kind of inaccurate and unfair. And I'm not going to go as far as to say that the movie is good, but I do think it's a lot of fun in the really expensive kind of camp action movie starring a hot guy and a beautiful woman kind of way. And we need more of those films. So thank you so much for watching. I'd love to know in the comments what your favorite Bond movie is and if you think Die Another Day is any good. Thank you for watching. Bye!